It began with the smallest of signs. A phone rang in the dark where no phone should ever be. A cell buzzer pressed again and again. A signal or a warning. A hidden package left in a bin, untouched, unnoticed, or simply ignored. 3 prisons, 3 officers in uniform. On the surface, it all looked normal. But beneath that surface, whispers traveled. Calls were made, and favors crossed the line from duty to danger. Step by step, then suddenly all at once, the rules shattered. This is the story of 3 prison officers. A tale where love, desire, and pressure turned trusted keys into deadly contraband. HMP Shotts, a place where mistakes aren't meant to happen. A maximum security prison in Lanarkshire, known for tight control, strict routines. For 3 years, Heather McKenzie worked there. Steady, trusted, not a single formal complaint. But everything changed in March 2020. Inside the cell of Zach Malevin, a convicted killer, officers found more than they bargained for. Not just hidden spice or tobacco. This time it was different. 1.45 grams of cocaine, a sleeping pill, and an iPhone that shouldn't have been anywhere near those walls. The drugs raised eyebrows, but it was the phone that triggered alarms, contacts, calls, messages that told of something far bigger. Mackenzie's name kept coming up. Police Scotland and the Scottish Prison Service launched a joint investigation. This wasn't about a few smuggled items. This was deeper, smarter. Reports suggested Mackenzie had grown close to Malevin, beyond trust. Something personal, something constant. They dug through logs, shift patterns. The same name, the same wing. Too often. And the timing, too perfect. Her shifts lined up with every discovery. Her entries in the records. Minutes before key finds. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't chance. This was calculated. Every move had meaning. Every item, part of a plan. The question wasn't just what she brought in. It was how long had it been happening, and who else was part of it. The uniform gave her access, but she did with that power what? It cracked the very system apart, and this was just the beginning. By the time officers started looking deeper into Mackenzie's movements, the true scale of her role began to surface. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment choice. There were layers, planned handovers, trusted drops, and a network that stretched far beyond the prison gates. Investigators followed her links to several unknown men. These men came quietly to her home on 4th Lanier. They brought phones, syringes, bundles of cash, 2,500 pounds handed over at her door. She took it all without question. Inside Shotts, deliveries were swift and focused. Some slipped through staff areas, others hidden in agreed spots near Malevin's cell, in prisoner safes, or even left in plain sight during busy staff changes. None of it was rushed. Every part was planned, regular, and precise. Another prisoner got drawn in. He stored items, passed them between wings, kept quiet, until one day he paused, told Malevin he didn't want the risk. That's when Mackenzie stepped in. She calmed him, promised no searches, no danger. His cell was safe. The system was secure. But behind closed doors, the truth was unraveling. When police raided Mackenzie's home, they found the pieces. Mobile phones, syringes, steroids, traces of cocaine. In the garden shed, 28 grams of benzocaine, a cutting agent with packaging ready for use. Each discovery tightened the noose. This wasn't panic smuggling. It was steady, cold, organized. Mackenzie knew every corridor, every check, and for 7 months she stayed one step ahead. But where her network thrived on order and supply, what came next wasn't about drugs. It began as flirting and spiraled into something dangerously personal. HMP Lincoln had seen tension before, but no one expected it to come from inside. Emma Webster joined the prison service in early 2021. A mother of 2, no warnings, no marks against her name. No one was watching her. But by August, a name began to show up in an inmate's contact list, and it wasn't hers. Bradley Bramwell, locked up and serving his time, added a new mobile number. The name on record? Emma Smith. At first, nothing seemed out of place, but soon the contact became too frequent to ignore. Prison records revealed 17 calls between Bramall and this so-called unknown contact. But when officers listened, they recognized the voice. It wasn't just anyone, it was one of their own. Webster. And the calls? Nothing hidden. No code. Just open talk of sex again and again. When questioned, Webster denied any affair, claimed she was just being kind, that it never crossed a line. But the facts told a different story. There was no pressure, no threats. She was the one who reached out, the one who kept it going. And then, on the 6th of October, the relationship ended, as fast as it had started. Just 8 days later, Emma Webster changed her work pattern. She switched to night shifts, away from the daytime rota where she'd first met Bramall. But on her new wing was another familiar face, Jimmy Bennett. Not a stranger. They'd known each other before his prison time began. And now behind bars, the connection picked up where it had left off. The signs were small at first. Bennett's cell buzzer pressed again and again during the same late hours. And Webster, often nearby. Then came the records. 75 calls between them. The numbers spoke for themselves. One call in particular stood out. Explicit, nothing hidden, no attempt to cover it. From there, it grew more personal. Letters sent from Webster to Bennett, filled with warmth, signed off as your future wife. And then came the photo, found during a routine search. Webster in her underwear. By this point, the pattern was clear. The night shifts, the calls, the letters. This wasn't bribery. It wasn't threats. It was about attention, about feeling wanted, no matter the cost. When the second affair was flagged, Webster was already under investigation, but no charges. Not yet. Not until the full story came into focus and her actions were laid side by side. Because elsewhere, in another prison, another officer was crossing the line, not for desire, but for something far darker. Desperation. HMP Birmingham had dealt with smuggling before, but not like this. In June 2016, during a routine check, a prison officer's movements caught attention. Richard Stack, a man with 11 years of service, trusted by all. That day he came through the staff gate as usual, but instead of going straight to his wing, he took a different path, slipping into an admin block where he had no reason to be. Security noticed. Minutes later, a bin inside the block was searched. Inside a black bag, a dangerous mix, herbal cannabis, a so-called legal high, and 2 memory cards for hidden phones. Stack denied it all at first, claimed he'd never seen any of it. But then officers searched his car, a Ford Focus parked on site. What they found left no room for doubt. 2 bags of skunk cannabis, 200 Class C tablets, an iPhone, and receipts for fresh cash withdrawals. In the interview, the truth came out. Stack admitted everything. He said inmates had approached him. He wouldn't name them, but they'd made it personal. They mentioned the tattoo on his back, one that showed through his uniform. And they went further. They named his daughter. They knew where he lived, who he cared for. Stack had no criminal past, no links to gangs, just rising debt, no way out. He spoke of stress, of trying to keep his head above water, of taking time off work. But in the end, the pressure won. The inmates had power. He had nothing left. And unlike Webster or McKenzie, there were no signs of friendship or desire here, just fear. Whether through force or choice, the result was the same. Drugs smuggled in, systems broken, and trust shattered. Back in court, Heather McKenzie stood at the High Court in Lanark. She admitted supplying drugs to Malavin and others at HMP Shotts between March and October 2020. But in court, her defense told a different story. They painted her as a woman trapped by her past, a first-time offender, a single mom, a victim of abuse. They claimed she was manipulated, targeted, drawn in emotionally, that she acted under pressure, that she deeply regretted it all. But the prosecution didn't buy it. They laid out the evidence. Logs, WhatsApp messages, witness accounts. This wasn't the odd slip. This was steady, planned, and organized. Every message, every drop-off, all of it pointed to purpose, not panic. When the sentence came, Judge David Young KC didn't use dramatic words. He spoke the facts. McKenzie had pleaded guilty to 3 offenses: supplying a Class A drug, a Class C drug, and giving mobiles and SIMs to a prisoner. And these weren't one-off mistakes. Each charge covered months of offending. The judge wasn't swayed by her defense. Yes, he saw how prison would hurt her children. He noted her injuries, her mental health struggles, and he recognized she'd arranged care for her kids. But in the end, none of that outweighed the damage she'd done. This wasn't weakness. This was choice, repeated, planned, and calculated over 8 months. And what shocked the court wasn't just the drugs. It was how she abused the trust that came with her uniform. This wasn't about loneliness. It was about power and how she used it. The sentence? It wasn't only about punishing McKenzie. It was a warning to staff, to inmates, to the public. The uniform brings responsibility, and when that's broken, the fallout spreads far beyond one prison cell. Heather McKenzie was handed 75.5 months, just over 6 years, the sentences to run at the same time. When the case reached Lincoln Crown Court, prosecutors kept it simple. This wasn't a woman forced or threatened. Emma Webster had chosen to cross the line, not once, but twice. The prosecution laid out the timeline. 2 separate relationships with prisoners, messages, letters, SIM cards. They pointed to how quickly she shifted from one inmate to another, how she kept the contact going even as suspicions grew around her. In their words, she went looking for these connections. The defense tried to soften the blow. They spoke of her personal struggles, how emotionally fragile she'd been after her private life fell apart. But even they didn't claim she'd been coerced, because she hadn't. In her own interview, Webster admitted the relationship with Bennett wasn't sexual. But as the judge later said, that wasn't the point. When Judge Katarina Sharon Knight gave her verdict, her words were clear. You were chasing, not being chased. The court found no sign of manipulation, no sign she'd been tricked. Webster had gone after the attention, with her eyes open. The sentence was 14 months in prison for misconduct in a public office, covering both relationships between August and November 2021. But it wasn't just a jail term that followed. It was the end of her career, the loss of all trust, public shame that wouldn't quietly fade. And the damage, it went beyond her. The system itself felt the cracks she left behind. Before we move to Richard Stack's trial and sentence, it's worth stopping to see the bigger picture. 3 prisons, 3 uniforms, 3 breaches of trust. The methods were different. The reasons varied. Pressure, loneliness, greed. But the doorway was always the same: access. And with that access, the cracks appeared. These weren't crimes that burst out of nowhere. They crept in slowly, hidden in moments that seemed harmless at first. Each case showed more than personal failure. They exposed a deeper truth: how routine can hide risk, how the familiar can make us blind to danger. In response, the prison service has started to act. Stronger systems, new checks, shift patterns reviewed, tighter controls behind the scenes. It won't fix everything, but it's a start, a step towards sharper eyes and greater care. Because no system is perfect, but with focus, with vigilance, it can be made stronger. And it must be, because when trust breaks inside those walls, the damage reaches far beyond them. Richard Stack stood before Birmingham Crown Court with nothing left to hide. He'd already confessed. The prosecution laid out the timeline. Clear, simple, impossible to deny. Stack had no past convictions, 11 years of service. But in the end, the betrayal of trust was too great to ignore. Judge Patrick Thomas QC recognized the weight on his shoulders. The debts, the threats, but he didn't excuse it. Looking straight at him, the judge said, "You knew the harm that drugs and phones cause inside prison. You gave in to pressure, but you still had a choice." Stack was handed 21 months behind bars, not because he was violent, not because he was the worst, but because when trust is broken from the inside, the damage runs deep and takes far longer to repair.